All right, so it is 12:05. We're going to go ahead and get started here. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our monthly professional development webinar. Today's topic is data analytics insights. We have an amazing panel of 3 professionals in this field who are going to be speaking to us today about telling a story from organizational data. This webinar today is brought to you by ICAT Professional Services. We are here to make your people and data greater. ICAT Professional Services is your partner for professional development, talent source, data analytics, and societal impact. Some of our offerings include our Career Academy, which hosts webinars like this. We have 2 every month. We also offer outsourcing, staffing and recruitment, applied data analytics, and social enterprise. Please feel free to check us out at www.icat.net. I also want to take this opportunity to remind you that we have an exciting webinar next month as well. It will be on Thursday, February 25th at noon, so mark your calendar. The topic will be called Employee Engagement, Re-engaging Employees in a New Normal. We also encourage you to give us feedback, tell us what you think of the webinar today, reach out with your name and email address if you need webinar resources. I know that we're also working on getting our webinars up on our website, so please keep an eye out for newsletters and updates regarding those as well. Just a reminder for webinar tools, we have the ability to mute and unmute, so we encourage you to go ahead and mute yourself while our speakers are presenting. If you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand or use the chat, and speakers may also ask for input, at which point you are more than welcome to respond verbally by unmuting yourself as well. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce to you today our panelists. My name is Kimberly Leonard and I'm moderating today. Our panel leader is Jonathan Tessier. He will be facilitating the rest of the webinar. And our first panelist will be Professor Azene, presenting on choosing analytics software for a data analysis project, and he's a professor of information systems and analytics. So we're very excited to have him here today. Our second panelist is Dr. Wendy Norfleet, CEO of Norfleet Integrated Solutions, and she will be speaking on, is your data presented correctly? And then finally, our panel leader, Jonathan Tessier, will also be presenting, and he is a certified professional coach and learning performance professional. And he will be talking about turning data into meaningful stories. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our panel leader, Mr. Jonathan Tessier.
Kimberly, thank you so much for that introduction. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. We're glad you're here. And over the next remaining part of this hour, we're going to talk about data analytics. And generally speaking, data analytics refers to the techniques used to analyze data, to enhance productivity, and to see business gains. And so under that giant umbrella of what I just described, we're going to look at it from 3 different perspectives with our panelists today. So sit back, relax, enjoy. We're asking for this to be interactive, so if you have questions, by all means, as Kimberly said, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you want to just put your question or comment in the chat, we welcome that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, and we'll get going. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. Someplace it could be morning. Good morning if it is morning. Good evening if it is evening. Good night if it is night. Jonathan gave you a definition of data analytics. I'm just going to add a little bit more on that. and also mention a few points why data analytics is now a big thing. Now and maybe for the coming years, it's going to be one of the most significant domain in IT and especially in applied IT. So it's a process. We have been dealing with data for a long number of years, hundreds, thousands of years. But what's new today is we have a lot of data available. We call it big data. We have data with high volume. Data comes with high velocity. We have different kind of data, varieties of data. That's one reason. Another reason is technology is advancing. The ability of technology, IT, computer system to deal with data is increasing exponentially. So now technology can do analysis. Artificial intelligence is everywhere now. Machine can learn, machine learning. That's another reason. Another reason is decision makers, they want to move away from making decisions based on their perception or experience. They want to do data-driven, fact-driven decision making. So that's the reason why data analytics is very prominent now, and it's going to stay for a number of years. So one element is technology. When I say technology, it's the hardware, the software, the infrastructure that allow us to do data analytics easily nowadays. In the old days, you have to have a degree in statistics to do data analysis, not anymore. Anybody can do data analytics, data analysis, if you understand the domain and if you understand the data you are working on. And the software, technologies, infrastructure are easily available now. So my topic is on choosing analytics software for your data analysis or data analytics projects. So there are a number of products available. So if you look at the chart, you can see some of the common data analytics or data analysis software like from IBM, we have Tableau, we have Microsoft products. I don't call Excel a data analytics software, but you can use Excel. You can start with Excel, but you have to work very hard to get things done with Excel. The next higher level product from Microsoft is BI, Power BI, Power Business Intelligence Software. And now we have Azure. Tableau has a number of products, Tableau Prep, Tableau Desktop, now Tableau Public. Oracle has products, Salesforce. So you can see in this diagram, there are the dominant one, the leaders one on the top right corner, including Tableau, Microsoft. There are also some niche newcomers who are, highly specialized, and they are innovating. They are trying to take over the leaders or try to move to the leaders area. So there are also visionaries product like SAS, SAP, Oracle, Salesforce. So there's a number of products. These are most commercial software, but there are also open source software. Unfortunately, I didn't include them, but if you Google open source data analytics software, you'll see some of them. So what makes this software or product unique is they provide a number of activity or functionalities. So if you look at the functionalities they provide a lot of functionality to allow you to capture the data, to clean the data. In some cases, in most cases nowadays, you have to deal with data coming from many sources. So you have to integrate. Integration is the most important activity nowadays. So that's part of the process. The first process is understanding your business, your data analytics goals, objectives. Once you do that, you need to deal with the data, understanding your data curation. Then you do the analysis. So analysis is just one piece of work, which is highly automated. So through analysis, you can do visualization also is big nowadays. I know the next presenter will talk more about the visualization. Next slide, please. So why is it important to choose the appropriate analytics software for your data analysis projects? Because the goal is also to achieve your analytics project's objective. You have to make sure you have the right analytics software. For example, if you have a data, let's say an unstructured, textual, qualitative data, and if you want to use Excel or even Microsoft BI or business intelligence, you may not be able to achieve the objective because they don't support text analytics or analyzing non-numeric type of data. So you need to know what problem you are dealing with, what type of data you have when you choose the software. So you have to make sure your software and the platform. Also, platform includes the hardware, the storage you need for maintaining data, collecting data, and analyzing data. So it has to be also cost effective, open source and many free softwares, you cannot use them for commercial purpose. So you can use them for research, for teaching, but you can't use them for, for consulting and so on. So you have to make sure you choose the right software with the right price. Also, it has to be robust in a sense. Your data might grow because data is now the new oil. Data is the new oil. So it's not only having just data in one time, analyze it and forgetting it. That was in the past. Now, data is a very vital resource, and organization want to keep the data, accumulate the data like any useful resource, and reuse them again and again by adding new data, by integrating with different kind of data. So you have to make sure the product you choose will allow you to grow, to adapt. That also related to the scalable factor. You should be able to scale. Next slide, please. Now the question is, how can we choose? Again, you need to make sure you have to look what you have currently in your organization. You might have already Excel, Power BI, or Azure, or any software. If you have that one, you start from that. Also, you have to make sure also you have the platform, means the storage space, the access, and it has to be also available. You have to make sure you have the right price. Also the front end. I know the next speaker, they're gonna talk about different data products you can produce and make available for users. As I said earlier, nowadays professionals are required to do some kind of data analysis and make decisions in biology, in chemistry, in medicine, in marketing, in finance. So it's up to the organization to make sure they make the data available for them, as well as the tools that allow them to get the insights and make decisions. So we have to make sure the data analytics software allow you to create a usable dashboard, scoreboard, or usable queries that allow the user to use the product. Also nowadays, professionals, we are moving, we're using different devices. Our phone, tablets, any devices. It could be our watch nowadays. You can do analytics from your smartwatch. So we have to make sure the software supports that devices. So these are some of the factors you need to consider when you choose the analytics software and platform. So I want to make sure that platform includes more than the software. It includes the network connection, the hardware, and as you know, there are a lot of platform available. Amazon has a platform. Google has a platform. Microsoft Azure is a platform that allow you to store your data, manage your data, and do analysis, visualization, dashboard, create dashboard on those platforms. So again, it's exciting time now, and it's a very important skill to have when it comes to data analytics, and most professionals are required to have this skill to do their day-to-day jobs in any field. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Professor. Appreciate it. Good understanding of data analytics to start us off with our session today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Norfleet and let her continue in our exploration of data analytics. Doctor?
Okay, thank you. In my excitement, I didn't realize I was still on mute. All right, so thank you for having me here today. And before I begin speaking on my topic, is your data presented correctly? Let me first provide you with my definition of analytics. It's very similar to Dr. Ezene, but I just want to make sure you're knowing from the point of reference that I'm speaking. So this term, data analytics, refers to the process of analyzing raw data to find trends, provide information, and/or to answer questions. And I know this definition may seem broad, but a large part of data analytics includes using these techniques that Dr. Ezene mentioned to focus on helping you achieve your goals. It's like helping you present your data. Okay, so a good data analytics presentation helps you provide a clear picture. To give you insight into why data presentation matters, let's look deeper into the topic by examining the what, the why, and the how. In answering the what, next slide, I'm examining the value of presenting data correctly. This is very important. Going back to the definition I provided, our raw data may be coming from multiple sources. And if there is nothing else, we know that too much data can be overwhelming. Therefore, the value or the what is that the data has to be organized in an understandable format. Usually the formatting of data takes place by placing it into one of three formats, either text, tables, and/or graphs and charts. Selection of the format often depends on the data, the information we are trying to provide, or the question we're answering. All right, so the selection will also depend on your audience. Okay, the person or persons who you're providing the data to. Even if I'm reporting on the same data, I wouldn't necessarily present it the same way to high school students as I would to my peers. And so usually, even if I'm presenting data, I have to really make sure I'm presenting to my audience. Remember, one of the values of presenting data is helping your audience achieve the correct interpretation. And so if I don't present it correctly, they may not arrive at the conclusion I want them to arrive at. I alluded to the why, next slide, but let's take a closer look. We see it on a daily basis. Next slide, please. For every set of data that supports a product or cause, we see another set of data that disputes it. I mean, how often have we looked at something that the percentage of people say coffee is good for you, and there's another percentage that says it's not good for you, right? We always see both sides. When we look closer at this, it's not always that one side or the other is lying, but merely presenting their data differently. People usually want to do their best in presenting their data because they understand that data interpretation matters. If I conduct a study with 1,000 participants to find out if a product works, do you want to hear about every facet of the results, or do you want to hear about how many people achieved you want to say yes or no, did this work or did it not work? Or do you really want to hear about how people achieve varied results because they did not follow directions? In most cases, unless there's a death or injury, we really want to simply know if the product worked. You know, we Google products all the time. We're looking to see if it worked or not. We're trying to make a decision. Yes, we do read the bad reviews, but we usually read those because we want to see, okay, is this something that I think is negligible, or is it something that's a showstopper? How many of us use Amazon? Okay, I'm sure I'm not the only one. This is a great example of data representation. If you're like me, you check out the reviews before purchasing a product. I do not read all the reviews. I usually try to purchase products with at least a 4-star and above. Now, that is not to say that I have not purchased products with less a rating. Rather than reading all the reviews, which in some cases would definitely be information overload, I may look at 1 or 2 reviews of the 5-star ratings, and then I check out the reviews, if any, of the 1-star ratings. Okay, and then I make a decision on if this is something that I want to move forward with. Just imagine if Amazon did not communicate this data in this way. And in fact, they left the raw stuff there, and there was no formatting, it was no scalable system, and we had to go through all of this to figure out the information we needed. Okay, and so what Amazon did is they're communicating this data in a way that is easy for us to understand. Lastly, for those researchers or analysts out there, we represent our data because we're often answering a question. For example, I'm often asked, what's my company's client satisfaction rating? I can pull out the list of hundreds of survey results and share those, and that will answer the question, but you would have to dig through it to figure it out. Or I can simply say that we have a 98% success rate. Both actions will provide the exact same answer, but one communicates the data very succinctly and clearly, while the other method providing the surveys would result in information fatigue or overload. So let's turn our attention to the how. First, when you present your data, you want to keep it simple. Next slide, please. How many of you, like me, think that people are trying to bamboozle you with data when they provide it in such a way that you cannot understand it? Sometimes it's just like they do it on purpose, okay? This does not mean that you will not have to provide detail in presenting your data. It just means don't provide too much detail initially. The rule of thumb is to go from general to specific. When deciding on how to present your data, you also have to consider the best method of presenting it. In some cases, believe it or not, text is the best selection. Text is a combination of text and figures. An example would be if I use text to say, I polled 100 people regarding if they liked working remotely. Responses included 55 yes, 35 no, and 11 undecided. This information could have easily been presented as percentages, and the polling size could also be left off. It's really simple data. I don't need to necessarily create a chart or a graph or a table for it. It's one sentence. And so it's just as easily presented in text format. Okay. Tables are used to present data in rows and columns when using rows and columns. So when I use tables to present data, there are a couple of rules of thumb that should be followed. You want to provide the unit of measure. You want to avoid too many symbols. You remove lines that do not add value. And so these are things that's distracting. And I started to put a before and after for this chart that I use, but then of course I wouldn't have had enough for my little bullet points. But you can see this is really cleaned up compared to what it started with. The third method to present your data is the use of graphs and charts. And these graphs and charts, they include the dashboards and scoreboards that were addressed by Dr. Ezene. This method allows for a more visual representation of your data, but you need to make sure that when you're using some type of graphical format, that your data can be seen. So you need to pick a method that highlights your data, that is not lost. Focus most on the points that your data illustrates. Per each table or chart you provide, you should be focusing on one major point. So maybe if you have 3 or 4 points to make, don't try to find one chart or graph that handles all of it. You may have to use multiple charts or graphs. You want to make sure you label your chart components clearly. And then if there's any aha moments or aha data, you want to make sure that you highlight it in some way. It may be a color, it may be, you have a circle around it. It just depends on what you're using in order to present it. I'm sorry, I wanted to make sure that I don't know if data analytics can be, Gabe had a question, I wanted to address it. I don't know if data analytics can be used to minimize and avoid misinformation, because I actually think that sometimes it can promote it if you're really good at data analytics. Perfect example. And it definitely wasn't a misinterpretation, but I didn't give all the facts, okay? So when I started my company, obviously you start a company and you always have to have a first client, right? And so you do the survey, they fill out a satisfaction, and I got 100%. Everything was, 5 stars, 100%. So when I had my website developed, of course, I only had one survey. I didn't say that on the website. Now I have, almost 1,000 surveys, but at the time it wasn't misinterpretation because I did get 100% satisfaction. I just didn't necessarily say I had one person or one client. And so it's real data, it's just interpretation, all right? So I hope this brief overview into questioning whether your data is properly presented helps you understand the importance of data representation or presenting data. Any questions? All right, I will turn it over back to Jonathan.
Doctor, thank you so much. I enjoyed your presentation. I love the coffee example. I agree with that completely. Just when someone says something's good, someone else comes along and says, oh, that's really bad. So that's great. And then I do the same thing with Amazon. I look at a couple 5 stars, and then I just have to go peek and see what the 1 star is saying and whether or not I can live with that 1 star reason. So I enjoyed that example as well. So thank you so much. All right. So I am going to sort of piggyback on what Doctor was saying with regards to, presenting your data and how you're going to illustrate that data and how you want to illustrate it could actually be taking advantage of the whole idea of storytelling. And so there is an art to storytelling with information. Research data can be very dry and dense, so it takes skill to sort of sift through the details and find those insights that are there. The problem actually comes in how those insights are shared, and both of our presenters have touched on that idea, right? So I'm sure we've all seen slide presentations that are just overloaded with information to the point that they're almost unreadable. So when it comes to data analytics, what's missing is actually a story. Studies show that all of us as human beings think in terms of stories. And if that's the case, then why not share our insights from data in that same way? And so that's what I want to talk to you about here in my presentation, is taking that data and telling a meaningful story around that data, because again, that's how we think. All right, next slide. Okay, so presenting complex information in an understandable way is what we're talking about when we say using storytelling with data. So how do you turn your data into a good story? And there are two questions that can help with that. And Dr. Norfleet mentioned one of them, and that was, what point does your data illustrate? What point is it trying to make? The other question you can ask yourself is, which aspects of my data evaluation or the insight should I be conveying? Okay, and so I want to give you an example of that here in the image you're seeing on the slide there. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a moment, and I'm going to ask you to do something. Just sort of close your eyes for a moment and then open them again looking at the image. Everyone do that? And just think, and maybe you can tell me, or you want to just write it in the chat, where did your eye go? What did it land on? And if you need to do that little exercise again, go ahead and do it again. Close your eyes and then just open it again and see where your eye went. Okay? All right. Mark says it went to the top left. Any others? Go ahead and just type them in. And this is, there's no right or wrong answer here. Okay. On the pile to the left. Yep. Top right. Yeah, these are all great responses. And the point is that what I want to keep in mind there is, when the moment we look at something, our eyes and our brains actually can be overwhelmed by what it's seeing. That's true of anything in life, and it's also true of data. So the question then becomes, where does my eye go? What does it land on? What stands out for me in all this data that's being presented? And so if you would tell a story with that data, as opposed to just focusing only on numbers, then you can help the mind and the eye digest the information that you're telling. So in this example here, maybe you landed on a color, maybe you landed on a number, or maybe you landed on an image. And in that, you were able to enter into that data. And then the story could then tell you the rest of what's going on. So in this example here, you have this idea of wasted planet. So you're talking about the idea of the waste that different countries are generating in the world. And rather than just give those as a series of numbers and a series of names of countries, you can get creative with storytelling and tell it as it was in this example, where we're seeing a mountain of trash that's being created, and some countries are doing better with that than other countries. Now you're telling a story about what the data means. You're not just presenting data, but you're presenting the insight that is coming from the data. All right, next slide. So when we're talking about storytelling, keep in mind that we are in a world where we are besieged by data, but we're desperate for meaning in that data. And storytelling is what helps us connect the dots of what is being presented. It is an incredibly effective way to communicate valuable insights and allow the audience to assign meaning and understand context to the data that is being presented. We can't just live in the world of numbers. okay? We have to understand what is the meaning being conveyed in those numbers. So using a story and specifically a storyline can be an appropriate way that will help to reveal what the data is trying to tell us. Now, there are actually 5 different storylines you could use depending on what your data is trying, the message your data is trying to convey. So let's go over each of these 5 different storylines, and then we'll look at the example there on the right. The first storyline that you could use is what's called change, and this is change over time. So a lot of data shows that there's a transformation going on, and over time you see that transformation. A second typical storyline is what's called drill down, and this is where the data starts with an overall view, and then it's followed by concrete examples. So going back to Dr. Norfleet, she told you about data, and then she gave an example of Amazon and its ratings. Okay, there's an example of what we're talking about where you drill down and use one example to bring to life this concept you're trying to get across. A third storyline is called zoom out. This is the opposite of drill down. This is where you start with some tiny little focus on something, and you take the meaning in that tiny little focused thing and you extend it out to the big picture. A fourth storyline is called contrast, and this is where you compare differences within data. And finally, the fifth storyline that you could use is called outliers. This is where you want to highlight or focus on a special case or some sort of statistical anomaly that is showing up in the data. So with those 5 storylines in mind, take a look at the slide I have on the right there. And what this is a slide of is, I'll read the information up at the top. It says, the title is called Bad Connections. Of all the robocall complaints filed by New Jersey residents from October 2016 to December 2019, it was Sussex County that stood out, filing 9,408 complaints per 100,000 county residents. So when you think about that and you visually look at the state of New Jersey that is presented there and Sussex County compared to the other counties, either tell me or in the chat, which one of these storylines are they using to convey this data? I'll give you a moment to think it through and look through those 5 storylines. And again, you can tell me or just put it in the chat. Which storyline is being used? Okay, we have a vote for outliers, a vote for zoom out, another zoom out, a change, outliers, outliers. Okay. Contrast, zoom out, contrast. All right. You guys are doing great because actually you can see all of these storylines in this example. You can see that there's a transformation over time because I gave you a date range, right? You can see where it's a drill down approach because we're giving you an overall view of a concept and we're giving you one example. We have a zoom out example with this because we start tiny and then we are talking about a bigger picture. There's definitely a contrast going on between most counties and Sussex County. And then you're absolutely right. This is also an example of an outlier where we are focusing on a special case or something that appears to be a statistical anomaly. So what's great about data is these storylines are in there. They're in the data. And you're not going to go wrong by choosing one of these storylines to help convey, again, the meaning that is coming out of the data that's being presented. Next slide. Okay, so like any good story, a data story should also captivate the audience. And so the easiest way to think about story would be to use the classic 3-act story structure, even when you're talking about your data. So think about what is that 3-act story structure that we're so used to in all the stories, the movies, the TV shows, the books that we read. That is that every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so the beginning, when we're talking about it from the perspective of data, is this idea of all about a challenge. It's at the beginning that we identify the problem or the issue that needs some sort of solution. It's all about setting the scene and introducing a key question. So in this example that you see here, at the top it says most common driver distractions. So there's the challenge. There's the problem. There's the thing that we need a solution around, or we have a key question about. Then, of course, the middle of a story is all about the struggle. It's the heart of the insight. There's a tension in the data and the subject matter embedded in that struggle. And our story brains like to know that getting to the end wasn't easy. In other words, the insight wasn't necessarily just obvious right out when we looked at the data in one quick glance. But instead, as we look at the data and think about it and look at it from different perspectives, the insights are slowly revealed. And this is a great example of that, because it is showing you common distractions for men and common distractions for women. So we're looking at this from different perspectives, and the data is telling us a different struggle depending on which perspective we're looking at it from. And then, of course, the third act of a story structure is the ending, or also what we call the resolution. And here the initial challenge or problem is answered. It's the thing that you want your reader or your audience or the person looking at your data to walk away with. Okay, and so in some respects, you may look at this slide and go, what I'm taking away from this is that there are different things that distract men and women who are driving. Okay, and if that's the general message you take away, that's great. That's wonderful. But if you look closer at the data, then maybe you're taking away a different message and therefore a different resolution. So, for example, look at what is the major reason why men are distracted, road rage, versus the major reason why women are distracted, which is the other people in the car. Right? So those require very different solutions then, because of the way we've presented the data. And I'll also submit that if you take a closer look, the distraction of texting has been given a slightly larger font than the other reasons for distractions. So you can see for men, texting is 7.6%. For women, it's 4.2%. I suspect that the reason the texting is given a slightly larger font size is because perhaps this is an emerging issue that needs some more attention than some of these other issues. And so it's being called out a little bit more by the size of that actual font that's being used. So again, this is a great way of conveying your insights to people. And that's really what storytelling with data is all about. Next slide. So one more thing to keep in mind about data and storytelling, and that is that in addition to actual storytelling, you also have a visual element that plays a very decisive role in your storytelling, as you can see in this example on the slide here, and as you can see in the examples I've used in my presentation so far. So I want you to keep in mind two things that are really important when it comes to visualizing your data. The first is there what I have listed as KWYRWTS. And what that stands for is know what you really want to say. Know what you really want to say. We are talking about a communication task here when we're talking about storytelling and visualizing our data. And so you can't know what story to tell or how to bring it to life visually if you really don't know what you really want to say. So that, again, goes back to the idea of really having an idea of what point does my data illustrate and do I want my data to illustrate. Secondly, design with simplicity. And that means designers intuitively know that less is more. And what I mean by less is more is from a graphic standpoint. Embrace white space. It's okay to have white space. Don't fill up every piece of space on your presentation or in your visuals or in your report or whatever. Don't take up everything. Leave some white space because the eye needs a place to go to rest between your content. Don't overwhelm your audience. The moment someone glances at your data visually, they are judging it. And what they are saying to themselves in that split second says a lot. And you know what they're saying? Our brains and our eyes are immediately saying, what's most important here? Where should I be looking? Okay, so in this example that you see right here, which is Atlantic and Gulf Coast shark incidents, just take a moment, look away and look back at it, and where does your eye go? What does it feel is most important? Where should it be looking, and where do you want the eye to look? Those are some key things when we're thinking about visualizing our data to tell a meaningful story. So in conclusion, the idea of combining text and visual elements is what makes data stories easy to understand and internalize. Jean-Luc Godard, who was a filmmaker, said sometimes reality is too complex. Stories give it form. And with that, I thank you for listening to not only my presentation, but to the presentations of everybody on the panel. And with that, what questions or comments does anybody have? Again, you can ask us, or you can put your comment or question in the chat. And I want to prompt you by asking you, what are you taking away from this presentation that stood out for you? We'd like to hear what you have to say. So go ahead and again, say it or put it in the chat, and I will hand it back to Kimberly.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just taking a look at the chat here, giving you all a second. If you want to ask a question, we'd be happy to hear it. I'd like to take this moment to just remind everyone, there's a comment from Gabe to let us know this monthly technical webinar is intended for professionals and leaders who want to develop a multidisciplinary awareness of various technical disciplines. And that can range from emerging and trending technologies, organizational improvement, social transformation, and other topics. So I'm just going to give us another minute or two here if you have any other comments before we close today.
Can I comment a few things?
Yes, please.
Yeah, especially for those professionals and leaders who are attending. I think the most important thing is to understand that data is a very, very useful resource, like cash or capital, as well as land used to be, and managing and nurturing on the data for your organization is critical. So I want to also add that 75 to 80% of the data analytics or nowadays data scientist job is on first part of the process, which is understanding the problem, the business opportunity, and understanding the data that exists or that's needed, and preparing the data in a continuous way to use it for analysis. And also, the other 10% is on the front end, which is extracting meaningful insights and telling stories. And visualization is a very, very, very powerful tools to do that. So also there are a couple of advanced technologies that are available to support leaders, professionals in their quest for using data to make decisions, especially as 85% of the data is unstructured. It's more textual, video, with social media, especially nowadays. We have many kind of data. The traditional data is numeric data, where it's highly structured, numeric or categorical or ordinal data, where we all learn in statistics classes. Those are only 15% of the data organization own. 85% are unstructured. Survey feedback, employees feedback, opinions, social media posting. All those tools are available to gather those data, analyze those data, and visualize those data, and use them for decision making. So I think there are additional training we can give on how to deal with textual data for analysis purpose, multimedia data, voice data, audio data. That's another. Another one is, the last one is artificial intelligence, or in particular machine learning. Machine learning is widely used to analyze data and build model for forecasting for future, as well as for doing prospective analysis, what if analysis, and so on. So machine learning is also becoming popular for data analysis and for data analytics. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Wonderful. Well, I thank you all. Thank you, panelists, for being here, and thank you to all of our attendees for being present and also engaging with us in the chat. We really appreciate you. I want to remind everyone about our next webinar, again, Thursday, February 25th at noon. Please join us for employee engagement, re-engaging employees in a new normal. And again, we just want to thank you. The webinar today is brought to you by ICAT Professional Services, ICAT making your people and data greater, and the services that we include from the Career Academy, outsourcing, staffing and recruitment, applied data analytics, as we talked about today, and social enterprise. Please check us out on icat.net. And thank you again, everyone, for being here today. With that, I hope you have a great afternoon, and thank you again for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.